In a world where God is dying, 4 heathens come to deliver the final nails in the coffin. From the depths of hell, Satan sends 4 puppets of the imperialist West and the Zionist Jews against God, Islam, and tiny kittens to bring you their propaganda and conspire for a new world order. This is Secular Jihadists from the Middle East.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is our live podcast of the Secular Jihadists of the Middle East. I'm your host, Faisal Saeed Al-Muttar from Iraq. I speak English. I sell chocolate. I sell moz. I sell falafel. And
avocado hummus.
And avocado hummus. And I also happen to be the leader of the secular caliphate of Iraq and Syria. Tonight, we have the usual suspects of the Secular Jihadist podcast. We have Yasmin Muhammad, who is the author of Confessions of an Ex-Muslim. She recently got interviewed by Gad Saad, that I recommend people to check out her latest interview. And is there anything else you're doing, Yasmin? Are you having a new baby or you're good?
No more babies. This baby factory is closed. I'm just having wine now.
Okay, why would you say new baby? Like, what? Would you have an old baby?
I do.
Like, you just have all babies are new by default. Well, maybe not. I don't know. Depends. If you're a Republican, I mean, they've been there.
Stop your Republican phobia, Ali.
Listen, I'm half Republican.
I need to understand that. I don't get that. How do Republicans have old babies?
Oh no, it's because by the time the baby's born, it's already 9 months old, right? Because it starts at conception. It was just a technical thing. I was just getting into. Never mind. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
I'm overthinking it.
Okay.
So speaking of technical,
overworked, overjerked.
We have Ali. Speaking of technical, we have Ali the technical. Ali is a graduate of the Technical Institute of Pakistan.
Don't overthink it, man.
He is part of the Pakistan nuclear program. He worked as an engineer for the Pakistan nuclear program, and his main goal is to nuke India and kill all the Hindus.
Oh.
He also happens to be the author of, and according to intellectual Tariq Fatah, he is considered Jihadi Ali. So that's his second name.
Ali. I am, yeah.
And he's also the author of The Atheist Muslim Journey from Reason to Religion. Because I think that...
It's the other way around.
So next with us is Armin Navabi, or the band Armin Navabi. He also happens to be circumcised. Is that correct, Armin? Are you circumcised?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Fixer, it didn't happen.
So circumcised Navabi is the...
How dare you make light of such a...
It's not...
He's feeling triggered.
Yeah, so
I'm triggered by the word triggered because it rhymes with the N-word. But anyway, let's just keep going.
Wow. The word trigger me.
Yeah.
So Armin also happens to be the advisor of Qasem Soleimani, who is the leader of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. He is responsible for genocides across Iraq. I happen to know him through Al-Qaeda. And
this might be the reason why he's blocked now, because of your intros.
No, I think he's blocked because of his insensitivity to the feelings of Muslims. Which I think is the main reason why nobody likes.
I wish I was blocked. It's the page that is blocked. If I was blocked, I mean, that's not a big issue. There's 1,600,000. I'm hoping by the time people are listening to this, the page is back, by the way, hopefully.
But you are blocked multiple times on Facebook, right? As a person.
Personally, yes. But this is the whole page, the whole Atheist Republic page right now. The feed, we have been completely lost access to our followers. They don't see any of our posts on their feed, and it's not just us. It's also the ex-Muslims of North America. Today,
there is another page. One of my friends run it. It's called دخلك بتعرف, which is an Arabic secular page that they make like satire of Islam and other stuff. And they also receive the same notification that I think it's like they cannot. And I think that even their feed cannot be seen. They said that even like if someone goes to the page, the feed. Stop.
Like a news feed.
Don't make it fun of my accent, man.
No. If you go to the page, you'll see it on the page, but you can see that even though like that page you mentioned, they have like 800,000 followers, and their posts are getting like 2-3 likes because you only see it only if you come to their pages. It's not showing on anyone's feed, and it's basically right now these 3 pages: Ex-Muslim of North America, Atheist Republic, and that page that you mentioned. Richard Dawkins just tweeted about this, all 3 of the pages, which is
who is Richard Dawkins?
He's the best.
I would like to comment on this before we get started about our discussion on political spectrum, because this is something I've been commenting on a lot recently because of the recent ban after I got banned, is that people forget that people say, well, it's just a Facebook page, etc., etc. But people forget, for people like us, we can use other platforms, but within the Middle East and Northern Africa,
there's nothing.
These platforms is all what they have. Like for them to, because most of the media, the traditional media, is either owned by the government or owned by militias and political parties. And Facebook and Twitter and some other MySpace, for those who are non-circumcised, are the ones who use it. So what you have is that these social media pages have literally became where the battle of ideas that Ali Rizvi and Yasmin and Armin and me are always talking about is that social media is actually a major player in the changing of minds within the Arab and the Muslim world. So it's really sad to see that Facebook and social media companies in general are somehow siding with the oppressors, right? So like if you are Ayatollah Khamenei, you're still on Twitter. But there have been many atheists or secularists and freethinkers within the Muslim world who have been getting their profile cancelled or deleted. So it's really sad to see that like these social media companies are somehow on this, even non-intentionally. I'm not going to say that that's intentionally what they want, but non-intentionally they're siding with the oppressors and siding with the people who are on the forefront on the fight against extremism.
Actually, this does lead us into our political spectrum conversation, because that's a common thing where the liberal left wing in the West end up siding with the Islamist right wing in the Muslim world.
Against people like us and against people who think like us. So today the discussion, will there be a Q&A?
Can I just say something? Imagine if these pages were Islamic pages. Imagine right now the amount of attention and the uproar on this, the amount of coverage this would give if Facebook was removing Islamic pages, and this is why us ex-Muslims and us atheists in general, we need to get together and we need to become a force to be reckoned with, because people just step on us and it doesn't really matter because nobody gives a shit about us. There's no consequences to this. So we need to.
But I've heard like someone wanted a sperm of someone, and then there was a fight that came out of it.
You're right. We do need to get loud, and we do need to make it clear that we are a force to be reckoned with as well. Like Muslims are 1% of the population in the States, and they're getting. I mean, like you said, imagine if this was a Muslim page based.
Imagine
in
if it was Linda Sarsour page.
Exactly. Imagine the uproar that would happen.
Oh my God, they don't give somebody, if someone doesn't get an unopened Diet Coke on a plane, I mean, people go apeshit.
That's
and
right.
Here you have like people who are subject to blasphemy laws. I mean, these are the people who have been, people like Mashal Khan who got lynched over there for asking, a question about religion. He got lynched by a mob, and there were policemen standing there. They showed up. They didn't do anything. I mean, these are the kinds of people who have the only channels they have are these channels like Facebook. I mean, this is massive. So when you have these broken reporting algorithms, and I know that this isn't something that Mark Zuckerberg does on purpose, just this, you have many groups, many Islamic groups that actually organize in en masse, and report certain posts and get them taken down and get people banned who already are, they don't have any other voice. I mean, they're speaking at great risk to their lives. And already. So, the fact that this happens is really unfortunate. There has to be a new system.
So, speaking of a new system, there has been lots of movements within the West, especially, I would say the United States has been kind of on front of it. It's the same with some places in Europe. And one of the reasons I have listened to many of Trump supporters, and some of them are, I consider, friends, and I assume some are good people, have made this argument is that we voted for Trump because he's going to shake up the system, because the system has been broken by bureaucracy / political correctness. So let's start with Yasmin. What are your thoughts about the situation of political spectrum, of political parties, where you are, and in general, you think?
Well, I think that the political parties these days are like the new religion. I think that people, like we've talked about how, so let's say, for example, you join your religion. So you're a Muslim. And then somebody says, yeah, but the guy that you love and that you follow and that you revere had sex with raped a 9-year-old girl. And so then you say, oh, no, but they grow faster in the desert and blah, blah, blah. And you make excuses because you're already part of this tribe. So you have to have allegiance. You have to have loyalty to the tribe. And even if it doesn't make sense to you, or even if you find it to be immoral or deplorable, you're still going to continue to support your team. And I think that political sides have become like that too. And you can see that most obviously with Trump supporters, that even when he was talking about grab her by the pussy and all that stuff, people are like, oh no, but, and then they're making all sorts of excuses for him. And then they also throw insults at each other too. So of course, if you're in one tribe, there has to be others, right? So if you're a Muslim, you have to hate the Jews. And if you're on the left wing, then you have to hate everybody who's on the right wing. So, anybody that says the slightest thing that might be different from what you believe, and, Muslims or religious people will call out blasphemy, and political religious people will call out, you're alt-right. You're a, whatever, Trump worshiping, Reuben loving, et cetera, right?
The bigot. You're a bigot.
The bigot, the racist, the Islamophobe, right? So, yeah. I personally don't want to belong to any tribes, whether they're religious or political or anything. I don't like the us versus them attitude. I don't like the tribalism. I'm not a fan of the whole othering bullshit. And so I'm not going to do it. So I'm just going to look at every single situation and I'm going to use my judgment. And I believe very strongly in liberal values, but that doesn't mean that I'm necessarily going to vote liberal, because it really depends on what country I'm in. And it depends on if that liberal government is even liberal. So, like people tend to mix up, I think, the Democratic party in the US, and they just call it the Liberal Party and they use the two words interchangeably, but they're not the same thing. Those are two different things.
I want to ask you a question. You spoke about, so as you know, and you all know, Dave Rubin has been pushing for this idea of a new center. And recently, in a conversation with him, he said that when it comes to the subjects that we talk about, like Islam and ex-Muslims and let's say like minorities within the Muslim world, which are not Islamic, the only group that actually listens to us on this is the right in Western societies, like the Republican Party, because he says, like, look at the. What do you mean, rehook your mic? Are you talking to me, Ali?
No, I'm talking to Armin.
Okay. So what do you think of this argument that, let's say, I mean, obviously none of us here is single issue voter. None of us here like think that this issue is the only issue we care about. But do you agree with this assessment that we as ex-Muslims, or not necessarily we as ex-Muslims, but we as critics of Islam and Islamism and jihadism and all these things, would you think that the right is a better ally? And to give you another hook, another example, because I'd like to know your opinion, maybe the panel can discuss me on this. So Christopher Hitchens, who I think that many of us here respect, was a very big supporter of the Iraq War. And for him to be listened to, because as you know, many of the Democrats were opposed to the Iraq War, except like Hillary Clinton and some other people. But in general, the left and the Democrats were opposed to the Iraq War. He sided with the neoconservatives, and he joined Hoover Institute, which is considered kind of a neoconservative/conservative think tank. What do you think of this approach that for our cause, we should consider that the left have betrayed us, right? The left, as we discussed some of in the discussion of the panel, they have sided with Linda Sarsour in Women's March. They have Bernie Sanders hired her. President Obama hired Dalia Mugahid to be his advisor in the White House. What do you think of the argument that we should side with the right to defeat radical Islam or Islamic extremism?
I personally think that there are people on the right and people on the left that we can ally with. Like I said, when we were on Dave Rubin together, I think that there are the rational people in the middle. I think we really are the biggest group. I think that there are a few fringe crazies on the right and a few fringe crazies on the left, but I don't think that either one of those are enough of a concern for us to start to
taking sides,
change things about so much. Yeah. So I know this idea of the new center, like that's, somebody mentioned it in the chat, as well as obviously Dave talks about it and Sam talks about it. It's basically just liberal, classic. This is who we are. We are the liberals, but then the left just went crazy with liberalism. It's what they did to feminism as well. They ruined feminism. And now I can't even say I'm a feminist without saying, but not third wave. So they've kind of ruined liberalism too, because now I have to say, yes, I identify as a liberal, but not a lefty. And so they're, yeah.
I agree with you, but I'm going to be the devil's advocate here instead of Armin tonight. Because I mean, what I just said about what you said with the right or the left, I think it's more of Dave Rubin's argument, not mine. I mean, I'm going to have a continuous debate with him around U.S. campuses to discuss actually whether we should side with the right or not. But so do you think that this new center, let's say the people who are not crazy, or let's say the people who are not, let's say the fringes, do you think that these people make up the majority of people who are in the Congress and the White House right now?
Oh, well, no.
No, that's not. I don't even know.
So the fringes are the ones who are in power. Is that one way to say it?
Yeah, they are the ones in power. But let's go back to this whole idea of who we should ally with and what our cause is. So I want to zoom out a little bit. So I went on, we're talking about Dave Rubin. So I actually went on a show, I think late 2015. And that's right after I'd written this article called The New Center Between the Left's Apologism and the Right's Bigotry. So it's online. It's on the HuffPost. So he saw that, and we went on and we started up a hashtag New Center and everything. So this is a couple of years ago, less than 2 years ago, and we talked about it a lot. And I'll say the same thing that I said then, is that I find it really strange that I have to agree with the energy policy of the Democrats just because I'm pro-choice, or the energy policy of liberals just because I'm pro-choice. If I think that, fossil fuels are a good bridge to, or nuclear energy should be part of the whole, new energy thing for the future, and then I have to also be pro-choice, or if I'm pro-choice, then I also have to agree with the liberals on everything. It just doesn't make any sense. It's stupid. The issues are so disparate, they're so different that that I don't think any rational thinking person can be allied with one side or the other. I just don't think they can. I mean, you can be more aligned with one side or the other depending on which issues, but it really is an issue by issue thing. And speaking of the rationality thing, when you talk about who we should ally with and who's best for what we're doing, one of the things is, we're critics of Islam, but that's not all we are. We also stand for rationality. We stand for reason. I want kids in schools to learn about the scientific method, how that works, for people to know when you say theory of evolution, what theory is, what the theory means in science.
But I like fucking magnets. How do magnets work?
How to what?
Magnets.
How magnets work?
Magnets. Well, that's what I mean. I think that there's so many different things. When it comes to civil rights, when it comes to civil liberties, when it comes to the rights of minorities, when it comes to just rationality, reason, science, education, all of these are all issues as well. It's not just critics of Islam, right? So when you take that entire agenda and then you zoom out, then you ask, okay, are the liberals better allies or the conservatives? The answer is probably neither. Right?
And both at the same time.
Yeah. And at this point, I think we're at the point where I don't even think that functionally, I don't think the left and right even exist. I don't think either one exists. I mean, you've got on the right, you've got, all the Trump supporters who are against trade treaties, and they've got they're all, I mean, it's amazing. Like the kind of a lot of the Bernie supporters' agenda and the Trump supporters' agenda, it has coalesced. I mean, they're very similar. As many people are like, okay, Bernie didn't win, I'm going to vote for Trump. And it actually makes sense. Ideologically, it makes sense because there is no left and right. I think that there's more an up and down now. And the up is the people who benefited from the technological and information revolution. The down are the people who got left behind by it. And there's different parts of the left and right that each one associates with. Right, that's one part of it. The second part is this whole clash of civilizations thing, right? Where you have in the left, and this I think is a very, very important thing. The left has gone out and tried to embrace a lot of minorities. They've become the party of the minorities. So you have, black people overwhelmingly vote liberal all over the world. Latinos overwhelmingly vote liberal. Muslims vote liberal. But when you look at these communities, if you go to blacks' churches, homosexuality is still a huge taboo. If you go to Latinos, a lot of them are very, very pro-life and they're Catholic. If you go to Muslims have very conservative social values. So you're in a situation where if Trump says something misogynistic, then he's an asshole. But if the Muslim says something misogynistic and quotes a Quran, then we got to back off and we got to respect it because it's their idea. So that means it's not about the idea. It's about who's saying it. And when it's not about ideas anymore, all you're left with is identity politics. That's it. And that's where the left today is. Mm-hmm. So I just don't think, and on the right, it's white identity politics. It's a whole different thing. So I don't think either of them. But the
white identity politics on the right, I think, is probably not as rampant as the identity politics in general on the left.
Yeah, because there's so many identities. And well, the other thing is like
and also the politicians on the left will play to identity politics openly. Well, I guess sometimes the politicians on the right do too, yes. But maybe not quite as openly.
I think just to add up, I mean, you see, like when the left talk about, I mean, for example, if you look at the campaigns of the New Democrats in, like, for example, like New Jersey's House Representative or something like that, like most of the conversation is, as a woman of color of Hispanic origin, my parents were immigrant. But I think you will not see
Transgender, I
on
only
the
have one
right.
leg, and
I don't think I have seen on the right someone says, as a white male, I'm here to represent the white male working society of Alabama. Even though it might be implied that, for example, they will say, like, the immigrants are here to steal your jobs. So there is kind of an ethno language attached to it. But I haven't seen yet, even Trump, with all the criticism against Trump, but I haven't seen Trump saying that I am here to stand for the white male to have a work, because I think that would be freaking political suicide.
Yeah.
Not even,
that's a very good point.
That being said, I think with the right, there is the religious element that they try to work on. That may not be ethnic, but religious would say, like, our religious liberties as Christians are under attack. For example, they can use this argument that Christianity is under attack by foreign immigrants or Muslims or atheists or something like that.
But can I just say something, Faisal, when it comes to this whole thing that, well, first of all, the counter argument for that, which I don't agree with, by the way, is that, well, whites have been in power for so long, so, that's it. The same thing doesn't apply to them. It's sort of like the men's rights people and so on. But I don't completely agree with it. Here's where I think that we should first acknowledge the places where identity politics does make sense. Like, if you're talking about people being stopped for no reason whatsoever, that does happen to a lot of black people. So if someone says, as a black person, I can tell you about being arrested or being stopped in my car for no reason, over there, it has a place. The identity politics makes sense. Another place where the identity aspect makes sense is coming to the white people in places like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, places where Hillary Clinton lost, where they had a lot of manufacturing jobs, right? Have either been automated or they've been outsourced, and both the Democrats and the Republicans lied to these people and told them that they're going to get their jobs back, and their jobs are not coming back. The only way these guys are going to get their jobs back is if they switch to software engineering or something. So now suicide rates among these white people are going higher, these working class people. The depression rates and psychiatric disorders are going higher. A lot of them are on welfare, right? They don't know what to do. And then they look and they see someone who looks like me or looks like one of us at Harvard talking about white privilege and how white people should not say anything because, they're privileged and they've been and we're in an Ivy League school and we're getting graduate degrees. And these guys, they're going to sit there and they can look at us and be like, fuck you, I'm voting Trump. So that's another place where the identity aspect is relevant. So it is relevant in some places. The problem is when it's overused and it's used to make people feel entitled, and they feel like I can say this because I'm a person of color. And one last thing, Yaz, I know you want to say something, is that this person of color thing too, like all people of color are not the same. Like the what black people went through historically is very different from what brown people or like the South Indians or South Asians have gone through, what East Asians have gone through. So like this whole idea that all people of color is one bunch, I mean, that's actually also a really
super offensive.
No, yeah, I think the entire thing is
it's like all you brown people.
The entire thing is bullshit. The right, the left, like all the alt-right, the regressive left, the Islamic nuts, the Christian fundamentalists, like they're all absolutely apeshit. And yes, not everybody's throwing gays off the roofs of buildings. I know that's a really low standard to not criticize somebody. Anyway,
I was actually, every time I went to say something, you actually said it. But what I was going to say is, yes, there is value to identity politics, but exactly like you said, when it gets overdone. So it's just like political correctness. It's like, okay, sure, I get what you're saying. Sounds good. Okay, now you're crazy. Like it keeps on going and going until it doesn't make any sense anymore. But so you guys heard where I am on the spectrum?
Armin, you are muted.
Oh.
Yeah, Armin, you want to say something?
Yeah, I think when you're saying identity politics is used correctly, I don't think it's being used correctly. I think what you guys are trying to say is that you bring up identity when identity is making a difference, and you guys are trying to make it so that it's not making a difference anymore, right? So the examples you gave, so for example, the people that we have a problem with when they bring up identity is because they want to make identity an issue. It's not something that some people use it. Some people use it to either gain an advantage, or some people use it to discriminate against other people. When you guys correctly mention identity is when you notice an identity is making somebody different, but you wanted to stop that difference. You know, for example, when you mentioned the ex-Muslim identity or the black person's identity, because you're noticing there that their identity is being used either against them, or some other groups of identity are using their identity as an advantage. So I don't think you're playing identity politics when you point those identities. You're actually fighting identity politics when you're pointing those identities.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think it's a semantic thing. When I said that, I meant really that that in some cases bringing up identity is relevant to the experience that you're trying to relate. Unfortunately, that is called identity politics by a lot of people. So that's really what I was getting at, is that when people do bring up, if a black person comes up and talks about being shot while unarmed, while they're reaching for their cell phones, and that is a very real experience and it happens, then the identity is an integral part of that experience. And everybody else brushes it off as, oh, that's identity politics. That's not identity politics. You're right about that, Armin. But people do call it that, and it's terrible. And every time people do play identity politics superficially, that's actually an insult, and it's a huge disadvantage to the people who are actually being targeted because of their identities.
Yeah, I like this concept. I think one of my Jewish friends mentioned it, and I was arguing me and him about whether he should.
You have a lot of Jewish friends.
I do.
They show up in every.
They're the
Jewish
best
friends.
Some of them are good people. So, so I was talking to him, and he said, "I like this concept." And after conclusion was the concept of identity by how the enemy perceives us to be. So for example, he said, "I call myself Jewish." Not because I am a practicing Jew, or even he's not even never been to Israel, nor cares to go to Israel. He doesn't even care about this stuff. But he said, but for the Nazis, I will always be Jewish. So my identity is important for those who want to kill me. So that the Nazi would not care if you were a secular Jew or an atheist Jew or a Reformed Jew or a conservative Jew. The Nazi would see a Jew. And I think that, on a personal level, ex-Muslims is a great example that Armin mentioned, is that for, let's say, Al-Qaeda, it doesn't matter if Ali votes for Hillary and someone else votes for Trump, whatever. At the end of the day, we're all ex-Muslims to them. So I think that's where the identity of us being ex-Muslims matter to those who want to kill us. So I think this is where legitimate use of identity politics, if we use the term identity politics, is necessary. Is that for those who want to kill us, our identity matters. But for those who don't care about for those who are going to judge you as an individual, not by your identity, it doesn't matter. But for those who want to kill, I have another point, is that when I do have an issue with some overuse, let's say, of identity politics, is that you're not allowed to criticize a culture of my identity belongs to. So, for example, if you talk to someone like Linda Salsour and people like her, he will say, "Who are you as a non-Muslim criticizing Islam? I, as a Muslim, I'm the only one who is able to criticize Islam." But if you spin it, she criticizes Republicans all the time, and she's not a Republican.
Yeah,
so
that's just stupid.
But it's being used a lot. If you, and it happens is only if you disagree with something. So let's say if you're a pro-choice, which all of us are, I think, many of the feminists will not tell us, who are you as a male to have a pro-choice position? But if you're a pro-life, many of the feminists, not all, #not all, will tell you, who are you as a male to tell women what to do? Who are you as a male to have a position on abortion? And the same thing happens within
mainly on Twitter, by the way. And thankfully, the whole world is.
Well, to be honest, I think Twitter has made its way to the real life. If you look at the Women's March, Women's March, for example, in DC, even though many of us agree with it as a good idea, But you cannot say that what happened on Twitter stays on Twitter. Like Twitter is not like Las Vegas these days. It's that Twitter
Trump,
has made this
Trump,
way.
his tweets are all over the news all the time. I agree with you, but I just think that Twitter is actually I don't think it's as representative of.
No, it's not. I mean,
there's a lot more of the fringe, right? There's a lot more fringe people, and they are influential. I'm not saying they're not influential, but it has a lot more of the fringe than.
Do you remember when
Microsoft, the people who voted in, Macron in France, right? So I mean, that's. It's a little. I can't really quantify it. I don't know what it is. I know there's an influence there, but I just don't think it's. I'm seeing that it's not as representative.
There's actually a quantifiable measure. Just one comment. Microsoft developed this AI Twitter account that's able to dissect all of the Twitter and speak what the people on Twitter say, and it's all turned into a Hitler. Turned into Hitler in like 5 seconds.
Oh, yeah,
Let's start talking about like concentration camps and killing Jews, and that was like within 5 seconds of developing the AI Twitter account. It immediately became like a Nazi. So that says about like how Twitter is not really sometimes representative of what real life is like. Yasmin, go ahead. Sorry.
Actually, I was going to ask you guys to tell us where you stand in the political spectrum, if you do stand somewhere firmly at all.
Should I start first?
Yeah, standing firmly. I mean, when you're talking about,
I think.
Festival.
I mean, I kind of politically evolved a lot for the past. I mean, obviously, I'm
just
young, so I'm able to change my mind easily. So I shift between center right and center left. So I find, for example, on social issues, I find myself more aligned with the center left on pro-choice, same-sex marriage, non-discrimination, Civil Rights Act. On these issues, I'm more on free speech. I'm more of a libertarian. I think that free speech should not be regulated. There should be no hate speech laws. While the liberals push for hate speech laws, the libertarians are for absolute free speech. On economics, I think I'm shifting between like center right. I like capitalism. I think it's a great idea. I think some safety nets to help the poor moving from like increasing economic mobilization is necessary. So people who fall down, like become poor, losing a job, losing whatever, I think there should be like some safety net to help them. On foreign policy, I think I'm closer to some people on the right, not all of them, but like maybe I'm closer to, for example, someone like Marco Rubio than I'm closer to Obama on foreign policy.
See, and it also depends what country you're in too, right?
Yeah, so I'm talking about a purely American perspective. Is that like on Iraq, I'm probably a communist, like compared to how much I'm like secular. I'm considered a communist there, but here I'm more like, I don't know, maybe like center left, center right. I mean, for the fringes, I mean, there is this term that Steven Pinker coined called the left pole. So the left pole, everything that is on the right of it is far right. And if you're on the right pole, everything on the left of it is far left. So I think both of the fringes consider me to be on so like the far right, for example, after Marine Le Pen elections and Trump, they call me like consider me like a regressive far leftist. And on the other hand, they will call me like a far right Zionist and all of this shit. So
me too.
So I think
let's make this fun.
Right. Yeah,
let's make this fun, Faisal. So for your liberal fans or your liberal followers or your liberal readers, what do you think would piss them off the most about your views in terms of where you align with the right? Where do you think they'd be like, okay, Faisal, you've totally sold out?
I think that I pissed them off when and that could be kind of universal, is that I think that for people who like
we're
us...
We're going to do this vice versa as well. So go ahead.
For people who think like us, they want someone who fits their narrative. And when you don't fit their narrative, they immediately attack you. So they actually, for the left, they want me to hate the West more than I should. So when I say like, I enjoy living in America, America is wonderful, I don't think the U.S. Army are a bunch of evil psychopaths who came to Iraq to kill us all, when I don't fit into that narrative, they snap at me because I like, wow, this guy is from there and he doesn't fit their narrative. So like they immediately like, oh, you have been indoctrinated by right wingers, you have been screwed up, they fucked you up. Because I lived in Texas for a bit, and they always say like, "Oh, you have been indoctrinated by the Texas education, whatever." Even though I only lived in Texas for like 5 months, but it's like the moment I don't fit that narrative that they want to put me in, which is that Iraqi refugee, he must hate. So he's a brown, so he must always talk about how America is racist and sexist and disgusting country, and how we should like be. So that's I think on the left, and on the right, they don't like the atheism part, and also they don't like the fact that I criticize the theocrats within their own gang. So they like me when I criticize Islam, but the moment I criticize Christianity or Judaism,
it's like, yeah, but they're not beheading people. They're not throwing gays off rooftops, so they're perfectly fine.
So they immediately snap at me as well. Like even if I make like this comparison that yes, I don't think they are as bad as ISIS, but implementing Christian theocracy in America is not a good thing, and they immediately like snap at me as like, okay, this guy's also not fitting our narrative. So I think this is like what I've been facing for the past 4 years.
What about you, Ozzy? You didn't tell us where you...
Actually, I was going to ask you.
I started, remember?
Oh, yeah, you did. You're right. No, but I wanted to kind of get more on the idea of what, where you, I guess,
your question
upset
about
a lot of
what upsets most people on the right?
Yeah. Well, for me,
it was whenever I say anything about Trump. It's very simple. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I think that goes for a lot of people. There's a lot of conservatives who can't stand Trump either, and for good reason, because he's not a conservative.
Yeah.
For me, one thing is like I support the Keystone Pipeline, right? I support, offshore drilling. I think that when it's done, I mean, I know enough about things like fracking. I know people who work in that industry to know that if it's regulated properly and it's safe, then I think that that is a necessary bridge to renewable energy in the future. So I mean that's one thing that I've had a lot of debates about. I'm also very pro-nuclear in terms of that. I am, 100% in support of renewable energy and that kind of future, and I'm aligned with the liberals on that. It's just that I don't think that you can do that without building a bridge, because the other reason is it's connected to national security, not just for the U.S. but for Canada as well. Because the more you don't do this stuff yourself, the more you're dependent on places like Saudi Arabia to do it for you. So that to me also is a very important thing when it comes to oil and fossil fuels. That's one thing. The other thing, a lot of it is what Faisal was talking about. So
yes, get us off Saudi Arabia, says Jeff.
Yeah, so
we all agree.
I think that's an important thing. I mean, there's all this stuff. There's another article I wrote. I think it was in 2009. It was called "Why We All Bow to the Saudi King." And at that time, there was a controversy that Obama had visited, was King Abdullah at the time in Saudi Arabia, and he had bowed to him, or he looked like he had bowed, and everybody's going ape shit. But the problem is, like before that, a few years before that, you had pictures of George W. Bush walking hand in hand with Abdullah, like they were holding hands and walking down. Like I don't know if you've seen those. So
that's more of an Arab thing, holding hands. Arabs don't really bow.
Right, but George W. Bush actually did it in public, so it's not it. So that was, people were talking about that a lot. That pissed the liberals off, and then when Obama bowed, that pissed the conservatives off. And I just thought that like every time we pump gas into our cars, especially if you have an SUV,
we're bowing to him.
You're bowing to the fucking Saudi king. Yeah, everybody's doing it, and especially if you have like those those SUVs that have the "Support Our Troops" stickers on them. Like that it just doesn't make sense. If you're driving like a big gas guzzling SUV, you're doing the opposite of supporting your troops, because you're basically feeding the economy that funds terrorism the most all around the world. So there's all of those. This is a debate that I have with liberals a lot. The other thing is like I'm very. I know that the U.S. the Democrats are very sort of pro gun ownership as well. They just want increased background checks. So I like that position, but I think I like the right to bear arms. I want to be able to go. I'm kind of more conservative on that when it comes to guns as well.
Paulo says, my respect for Bush went up when I saw him dodge those shoes. The Arabs loved that. Like when he dodged those shoes, every Arab kid has dodged the shoes from the mom. Respect.
When he did the shoes and he threw the shoes at Bush, it made me feel a little sad because I was like, okay, the Japanese got nuked. And then a few decades later, they had a chokehold on the world's electronics and the auto industry. And then, when the Jews went through the Holocaust, they came back, and now everybody's doing so well in the Jewish community. And the Arabs, 70 years later, they're throwing shoes.
They're still throwing shoes.
Like, this is so. I'm like, you guys, you got to come back. Like the black people went through slavery 400 years, came back, and now they have a president. But we've got shoes. We're throwing fucking shoes.
Yeah, they're still at it.
So it was a little depressing, but.
Arabs do that. They depress people.
So, but yeah, and a lot of it's the same. On the liberal side, when especially the criticism of Islam, that's a big problem. And on the conservative side, if I talk about Christian, like my whole thing is I'm like Christianity and Islam and Judaism are all. Islam may be more dangerous at this point in time. That's obvious. Everybody knows that. But Christianity and Judaism and Islam and Hinduism, they're all equally stupid. They're all equally false. They're all equally, to varying degrees, at least the Abrahamic religions are equally bigoted, if you go by the scriptures. Mm-hmm. It's just that one is just taken a lot more seriously by its adherents nowadays, like the others were by their adherents at a different time. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I think gets the people on the right really worked up.
But this time, just one comment. I mean, in Uganda,
I think Armin was trying to say something. Sorry, can you just hold that thought,
Uganda's one country, right? Yeah. Armin, go ahead.
No, I'm just, Max was wondering if he could come on and try to fix the audio, because he's saying that if you keep recording like this, it's going to take him forever to fix the, to sync the audio. So he was wondering if he could quickly come in and fix it.
Sure, yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Not sure how. Should I send him? You going to share the link with them?
So a lot of this in the audio version, I guess this will be edited.
The audio version. The patrons get to see that how sometimes difficult this could be for us to get all this, and how much work goes behind the scenes. But
how helpful Max is.
Yeah. Okay. So Max is saying, "Give me a few."
Max is paid now, Jeff. Who says that? How we just started to pay him finally.
Yeah, but not much.
Not as much as he deserves, of course.
Not as much as he deserves, yeah.
Just send us money, people.
Yeah.
So we can pay our people.
Well, because he's Jewish, and this is a Jewish conspiracy. That's how he's getting paid. The state of Israel is
sending him shoes.
Yeah, exactly.
Officially, you should send him one of your Jewish memes that you sent to your girlfriend, your ex-girlfriend.
Armin, while we wait, do you want to tell us about your where you fit on the spectrum?
We'll get to
that. Okay. Well, I mean, okay, so I usually call myself a libertarian, just like these two fine gentlemen, but I always...
What? Ali and Faisal call yourselves libertarians?
No, I don't, but...
I'd say that in a lot of ways,
I'm libertarian on weekends.
Well, Faisal used to call himself a libertarian, but I don't know.
Only when it comes to like free speech, but I do think that it's nice for people to wear seatbelts, and I do believe in safety nets.
Okay, this is what pisses me off. People, when they say libertarian, they think like you're saying like you want no rules. That's anarchy. That's not libertarianism.
No, I didn't say
laissez-faire. I think
social safety nets.
Yeah, but social safety. I mean, there's obviously even. I mean. Even the most hardcore capitalists, they don't see no role for the government, right? People that see no role for the government, they're called anarchists.
No, but that's different than safety nets.
Yeah, all right. But here's the thing: even when you look at the safety nets, when you look at most of the literature when it comes to free market capitalism, they recognize that the market is blind to some positive external factors to people, and some negative external factors that the market is blind to, and that's where the government has to come in and adjust the market and provide some. When those benefits the market is not adjusting for those benefits, the government comes and adjusts for those benefits. And Max is here.
Reform capitalism. I'm talking about reform capitalism.
Guys, I had to put on my pants for this.
That's okay. Just don't move the camera down.
You didn't have to put on your pants.
Shit, I forgot. Hang on, let me take my pants off.
That's better.
Guys, so to our fellow patrons, this is the guy that's making everything happen. This is most of the work. We just come here and speak.
He's also circumcised. Max, you're circumcised?
That's correct.
Okay, that was a wonderful show, guys. That's the end of the show. Max is circumcised. See you next time.
No.
So we're back.
Yes, you were back. And thank you. All right, so I just sort of talked about this whole, left, right, center, up, down, about all this stuff. So why do we use these labels? And well, people use labels in general to be able to communicate more efficiently, right? A lot of people don't like using labels, but if you had no labels, communication would be impossible. In fact, every single word that you use is basically a label for something, right? The problem is not labels. The problem is when labels have different meanings to different people, and therefore they're not helping with communication, but they're actually making it even worse, right? So I mean, some terms like atheist, secular, to a lot of people, these words have very consistent meaning between people. And sometimes when people try to change that meaning, and when they try to say, atheism means that you're smarter or scientific, like no, let's keep it simple. We all understand atheism just means a lack of belief in God. So it's clear, we know what we're talking about, so it's an effective word to use in communication. But the thing is that with left and right, we're always confused about so are you a true leftist or not a true leftist? We really don't know, like, where's the line? At what point you don't belong in this group, And the thing is that these labels sometimes lose their purpose. The purpose was to be able to communicate instead of trying to lecture somebody about all your views, to be able to use one word and now you're past the point about people have a good understanding of what your views are. It's very effective communication. But instead of using it for better communication, it has become these words are being used for creating tribes, right? And now you belong into these groups that you feel like you have to defend, even though these people that you're in a group with, you don't share anything. You wouldn't have defended them other than because of the fact that you feel that you belong in the same group with them. And to show how tribalistic this political spectrum has become, it's easy to show because if you look at the most dominant ones, which is the left and right, the people within these groups agree on some things that it's weird that they agree on. For example, if you look at the left, the left is on social issues. They want less government involvement, like women issues or gay rights. But when it comes to business and trade, they want more government involvement, right? So when it comes to, tariffs and, trading with other countries and stuff. But when it comes to right, it's the opposite, right? So where social issues, they want more involvement, and when business and trade, they want less government involvement. But if you think about social issues and government and trade, these are not very related. If people were just thinking about ideas and just coming up with which one works, which one doesn't, you wouldn't see two groups with members within each group so much in agreement on both social issues and business and trade issues. You would have seen a wide spectrum of ideas of people. Some people, you would have seen people that believe social government should be more involved in both social issues and business issues, or people that believe that government should be less involved in less in both social issues and business and trade issues. But because you see how popular these two groups are, it shows that when people feel like they belong into a group, instead of trying to analyze which ideas they agree with or they don't agree with, they think that, okay, I'm part of this group and the members of this group are supposed to believe this, so therefore I believe that. And that's how tribalistic it becomes. So if you join the left because of social issues, now you end up all of a sudden agreeing with them on their economical issues just because you think that you belong in that group and you have to agree with it, right? But I mean, this is why I stopped being a libertarian. I mean, because I think you have to look at each, these terms cover so many different topics, free speech, women's rights, gay rights, business, trade, that you can't, it's so hard for somebody to be part of a group on having an opinion on all these topics. How could you be like, yeah, I'm part of left, so these are my, I mean, there are so many different topics for it to be so difficult for you to be a part of a group that agrees on almost all of these things. So instead of being so ideological about what we find is true and what we find is not true, we have to examine all of these cases case by case, instead of trying to belong to any of these groups. And even within one of these issues, like for example, within, I don't know, trade or more government involvement, more tax, lower tax on this industry or not. You can't be like, okay, so I'm part of the left, so I want more tax, or I'm part of right, I want less tax. You have to look at evidence, not for that specific industry. You have to look at what other countries have done for that specific situation and what were the results were. These shit are so complicated. For people to just form opinions just like that because they belong into a group. I mean, the economists that are studying, their job is to study these things day in and every day. They themselves, they disagree with each other, and their disagreements are way more sophisticated than these people, political people. Something? Yeah, go ahead.
But you define yourself as a libertarian, so aren't you putting yourself in a box?
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying I used to call myself a libertarian, right? Mm-hmm. But now I try to look at everything case by case, right? Mm-hmm. And and so even
none of us really define ourselves as anything.
I think.
Yeah, go on.
And I was going to say, like this, the new French president, Emmanuel. Am I going to pronounce it wrong? Macron, or whatever. I don't know. Macron. Yeah. So macaroni. So this guy, I was reading about him, and I didn't know that much about him until very recently, and he's actually one of those guys because I've always been a sort of mix and match. Like on the economy, I do believe in. I do think corporate taxes should be low. I am a free market liberal in that sense, and his socially he's liberal. His version of secularism isn't really the French version of secularism. How the American version of secularism is more neutral. The French is a little bit more slightly anti-religion. So I kind of I agree with him on most of the stuff he says. I haven't really found a lot about him that I necessarily disagree with, and he's actually I think he is representative of what might be a backlash against a backlash, right? What Yaz was talking about, like most people are sort of center, like they are centrist. They're not necessarily far left or far right. They're not really as ideologically committed as we think they are, as Twitter would make it seem, right? And I think that this is a good precedent. And there are people who say, well, he's different on. They just look at the whole Islam thing and they completely ignore everything else. And I think that is an issue. I wish Justin Trudeau was different on Islam. I wish Obama was different on Islam. I wish Kerry wasn't such an apologist. But when you weigh it and you look at all of the other things you care for in your life, like education and science and rationality and civil rights, then it's a tough choice.
I mean, I think that you brought that. I think that the closest, and this might be a confession, but I think the closest political person in the U.S. that I can think he's the closest to me is Michael Bloomberg.
I agree with you.
That he is centrist on economics. He's kind of a little bit more aggressive in foreign policy, and he's socially liberal and he believes in climate change. I think that he's much closer to me.
Arnold Schwarzenegger is another one. He's also
So Bloomberg is closer to me much more than Hillary or Obama or Bernie.
I think of writers. I think of people like whenever I read certain people, I find myself agreeing with them a lot. Or even if I disagree, I find myself respecting where they're coming from. People like Fareed Zakaria, Thomas Friedman, Jeffrey Goldberg, Christian Amanpour. People like that I find are, I guess they're the realists when it comes to foreign policy. And when it comes to, I guess, foreign policy, if you ask me what I'm aligned with, I think that, George H.W. Bush, Senior Bush, he had a very well thought out foreign policy. It wasn't perfect. There's a lot of things you disagree with, but I like the way he conducted things. I like the way he formed coalitions. I like the way that he, used the UN in the right way, but didn't let them go too far. There's so that kind of thing. I think there's a lot of picking and choosing. I just don't think, again, I said this before, is that you can't be a rational thinking person and just be aligned with one side on all of the issues. It's ridiculous. Like this whole idea of left, right, liberal, conservative. But Armin, what's the question you have for everyone?
Yeah. Okay. So here's a question for all of you. Given that another way people use these labels is that they put you in a box and then they use it as a reason why you can't be trusted, like, oh, you're a libertard or you're alt-right, and then they just find a few things that you have in common with some group of people, and then they put you in there, and then they think like you should be always dismissed, right? Because now you belong into that box.
Well, there are libtards and alt-right, by the way. Those are the people who just blindly...
I know, but then you're not one of them. But then because they found 4 or 5 arguments that you make and they make, and because of that,
one.
Yeah, you end up in all the groups. I end up in all those groups.
Yeah. I mean, on Atheist Republic, when it was live, we used to get accused of being too far right.
Motherfuckers.
We used to get accused of being too far right and too far left on the same day.
I know, yeah.
But given that, alt-right is now such a hot topic and people want to make sure that they don't get into that, how do you, in these day and age, how do you criticize Islam and not be boxed in with those people? Like, how do you manage that?
Who goes first? Yaz, you want to take it?
I just do it. I don't care. I'm just going to criticize Islam and be careful not to criticize Muslims as individuals and criticize the religion. And that's it. I can't be responsible for how people are going to take whatever I say, and you know what I mean? I can't be responsible for how anybody could take my words and use it to fulfill whatever agenda they have. So if it's on the left, if their agenda is to show that I'm a hateful bigot, or if it's on the right, if it's to show that all Muslims are hateful bigots, I can't. I just have to speak my truth, and that's it.
You know what? That's, I think, is the right approach. That's the only thing you can do. And one of the examples I always give is the Noam Chomsky example. The Noam Chomsky criticizes U.S. foreign policy, and there are many times he's done it very well, and he's been very right about it. Right? And we talked about East Timor. Like, a lot of things he says about U.S. foreign policy have made a lot of sense. The problem is that Bin Laden.
Wrong.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying
everything's wrong on foreign policy.
Of course, listen, I'm telling you, like, in the last 15, 16 years, I think he's gotten everything wrong, right? So let's I'll say that to say, just for, in case people thought I was a libtard or a regressive left, I'll tell you, in the last 15 years, I think he's completely lost his shit. However, before that, I think that there are a lot of things he said that made a lot of sense. And he used to criticize U.S. foreign policy. The thing is, then Bin Laden kind of started quoting Osama bin Laden. Now, supposing, now, does that make everything Noam Chomsky, just because Bin Laden is now using Noam Chomsky and buying his books and quoting him in speeches, does that invalidate everything Noam Chomsky says, or says that does that mean Noam Chomsky is allied with Bin Laden? No, it doesn't. Like, that's ridiculous. So it's the same thing. Like, if we're criticizing Islam, that doesn't necessarily mean that suddenly we're all, we all love Trump and we want to ban all Muslims. Right? Like, that's absolutely ridiculous. So, this is one of the problems. Like, you always get lumped into these categories.
Yeah, I mean, just to give you a reference, so once I think there was a lot of discussion about the settlements in Israel, and I think I shared and retweeted like multiple articles criticizing the settlements in Israel, which is actually my position. So then there were people like from Hamas,
You mean like
literally
the
like
West Bank settlements?
yeah, the West Bank settlements, yes. So there are people like with the flags of Hamas on Twitter, literally retweeted me after criticizing the settlements, and then I was wondering, so like, I think is that people. I mean, I'm in complete agreement with you guys. Is that if people want to spin our words to make it fit into someone else's narrative, is like, oh look what Yasmin is saying fits exactly what Trump is saying. Therefore, she loves Trump or she's furthering Trump, whatever. I think it's completely ridiculous because as long as someone is not saying that I am doing it because of Trump, I think that somebody's just saying what they think. And they're not
And you
being
know what?
forced or
You know what?
coerced.
Sometimes Trump says things that actually do make sense.
Mhm.
When Trump was
Yeah.
talking about making the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization, I was like, yes, this is good. I support that. It's opposite of
yeah,
what
so
Obama
Forget
said.
about the
So I
Islam.
think that-
One thing that Trump said when he said that in one of the first debates, he said that in healthcare we got to take these artificial lines out around the states. We have to take those off, and we have to let people buy across state lines. I was like, yeah, you're right about that. And then when he said that Bush, when Jeb Bush was saying that, well, there was no terrorist attack under George W. Bush, and Trump is like, well, no, what about 9/11? That happened on your brother's watch.
Whoops. That's a big one to forget.
He was right about that. So, yeah, I mean, these people, that's the whole point of this stuff, is that there are, you can't, it's complicated. You can't just align yourself with one label or not. I'm not saying you don't have to love Trump to acknowledge that in fact, you have to acknowledge that he's right sometimes. You have to. If you don't, then you're not going to have any credibility. You have to say that when he's right about something, you have to say that, okay, Trump was right about this, and this is why he's right.
You're not going to have any credibility because it's so difficult to be always wrong. Like, it's almost impossible. Like,
it's almost impossible to always be right, too.
Yeah, it's just like you have to be divinely inspired. Like, it has to be a divine book or something for it to be always right. I think it also needs to be divine for it to be always wrong. Like, you really have to try really hard to never make sense. And I think,
you can make a generalization on some.
I think you're wrong about all that, Armin.
Yeah, is that like, I mean, somebody can find the positive of some. So, for example, let's talk about Hitler. Okay, how many good things Hitler did compared to how many bad things Hitler did bad? I think somebody can overall say Hitler is bad, even though he did some things that might be considered right or good. I mean, if Hitler says
vegetarian, he was always faithful to his wife.
Yeah. So if somebody says like, well, Hitler says
one testament
done, then maybe he's making sense. But
it was the right one. Actually, I don't know that. I don't know about the.
So I think like overall, someone can condemn a candidate or a president based upon the overall theme of what they do, without necessarily agreeing or disagreeing with everything they do. I think that, like, if you do cost-benefit analysis, you can say Hitler was bad, or Stalin was bad, or Mao was bad, Saddam was bad, even though they might have done some good things or said some right things. But I think that like you have to judge it by the theme of what these people are doing, and you can say overall, communism or Stalinism in that regard is mostly bad ideology.
I think I always go back to what, and Armin's brought up this point a lot, and this is obviously what I wrote about a lot too. Is just the difference between ideas and people. When you're talking about ideas, like instead of talking about Muslims, and there's some Muslims who are liberal, some interpret it this way, some are reform, some are conservative, some all of this stuff, like the Islamists, the jihadists, and all of these different groups. And this is stuff that's really, really confusing, and it just complicates a simple situation. There's two things. There's a set of beliefs that you sit and you challenge and you debate and you criticize and you find that they're toxic. And if you follow these, then, you're going to be doing something toxic. And then there are people are very complicated. People are a lot more than their beliefs. Their beliefs is, for some people, it's a huge part of who they are. For some people, it's just a little thing in the back. It's just, this is my identity. So it's making that distinction. That's, I think, a universally relatable experience. I mean, there are conservatives and there are liberals who all have certain beliefs, but they all want to do eventually the same things when it comes to being people, in terms of their kids and what they like doing and how they socialize and how they want to live their lives, what kind of future they want. And then those commonalities as people, I think coming together as community is a lot easier than coming together as ideology. And this is one thing I noticed, like if you look at Jews and you look at Muslims, it's really fascinating because, Jews will, you're an atheist Jew, you're agnostic Jew, you're whatever, it doesn't matter, but we're all a community. And with Muslims, like, well, you think music is haram, you think hijab is wrong, they try to come together on one ideology, and it's impossible. Every single person is going to have some sort of different ideological interpretation of everything, and that causes more division. So,
the question is, how can we handle these divisions is the main question.
I think that you make that distinction between ideas and people, that ideas are saying something, doing a wrong action or an assholic action or an assholic idea does not make you an asshole. Being an asshole is very different than doing something assholic, if that's a word, right? So
we're going to call out assholic options regardless of the skin tone of the person who is the perpetrator.
Right. And
what do you think of this distinction? I mean, you kind of like the distinction between Islam and Islamism, that I think that even Islam is trying to adapt, because distinction that's like Islamism is the driving force of terrorism.
With all due respect to Majid and everybody who's talking, I know what they're saying, I know what they're trying to get at. I just don't think it's relatable. I don't think this is a message. If you're out there and you're trying to message, if you have a Christian person sitting there and a Christian's looking at this, he's like, oh, Islam and Islamism. So maybe so you have Christianity and Christianism. Like, they're not going to relate to it. That's not something they recognize. They're like, this is bullshit. But on the other hand, if they see something like, if you tell them that, okay, there's Christianity, which is in the book, and then there are Christians who are different. That's something
someone can make the argument. Someone can make the argument.
They can recognize that, right?
So there is a Christianity and there is the Christian rights.
They don't parse that detail. That does not appeal to the normal person identify. Like if you say something like, okay, Islam is a religion, there's a lot of stupid shit in it. And there's Muslims that are people. Not all of them are full of stupid shit. That's something that a Christian can relate to, because they can be like, okay, Christianity, there's a lot of weird things in it, but Christians, not all of them believe the same way. There's a parallel. And when you have parallels, you can empathize. But if you're talking about, there's Islam, there's Islamism, then there's jihadism, and then there's like conservatives and there's Salafists, and you're asking people to, it's like, when Muhammad flew up to heaven and negotiated with Moses, he's like 50 prayers. It's too much. Like, this is not the kind of thing.
Not helping. It's just hindering.
Can help. I think that simple idea that, there is a set of ideas, and that's Islam. Ideas we have to challenge, we have to debate in order to move together as a society. People we have to respect. Even if they believe crazy shit, you have to respect their right to believe what they believe. That's something that's relatable across the board. And that's a message people can pick up really easily.
You have to see their agenda, though, because people that mention Islam and Islamism, they're trying to say, like, all those bad things about Islam, they're not Islam. They're Islamism.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
nothing to do with Islam.
Yeah. So I think, like, it's cute, but it makes no sense. Islam is...
Nobody's buying it.
I'm triggered. I'm triggered.
Okay, Islamism. No, wait. Let me finish. Islamism.
No, don't finish. No kidding.
No, within Muslims, it's effective. Let me just say that, and this is in defense of Majid.
Within Muslims until they freaking read their book, because everything they're saying Islamism is political, but Islam is political. Islam has always been political.
Islam is inherently it's not just Islam. Judaism and Christianity.
Yeah, but we're talking about Islam right now. Nobody says Judaism and Judaismism. or Christianity and Christianism.
Exactly.
We all know that they're all inherently political, and we don't try to make two different religions out of them, saying one is political and one is not.
I have a question.
They're all inherently political, but we don't parse those words, and we don't come up with all these neologisms to sort of complicate the matter. Now, but that said, like I just want to say this before Faisal, before you go on, is that in within the Muslim community, like within Muslims are like, okay, listen, I don't relate to it. There are really good Muslim people, like people in my family who look at all this stuff and they're like, listen, I am Muslim, but this stuff I just don't relate to even remotely. How can these people be the same as me?
And now you're talking about people, and you are correct. When it comes to people, there are differences, but when it comes to the actual religion, there is no difference.
Exactly. Yeah. But these people also, the Islamism thing, it helps them separate themselves from the crazies, right? So
in Arabic we have Islamist. We say Islamist and Muslim, but we don't. There's no such thing as Islamism because that's a separate religion.
No, there is
or something.
So I'm gonna. The reason why I want to I always make these distinctions. Let me explain why. So, for example, if we want to make Egypt or Iran or Iraq secular, let's say we want to have these countries to be secular countries, should we get rid of Islam to make them secular, or should we get rid of Islamism to make them secular?
Neither.
No, if we get rid of
secularism, I don't think you understand what secularism. It's freedom to practice your religion.
No, separation of church and state.
Separation of church and state, sure, but you can still be a Muslim. Nobody's telling you to stop being a Muslim.
Huh?
No, but you do neither, Faisal. You don't do the Islamism. You don't get rid of anything. What you do is you introduce certain elements into the society. You introduce you introduce the scientific method. You introduce Enlightenment thinking. You translate books. You get them exposed to other ideas. You don't, and this idea, like I don't think bringing down, like the people who are the worst of the Islamists, the people that are the biggest problem to you, they're the last people who are going to buy this Islamism thing. Totally. Like I'd say, like Yaz.
No, I'm talking about like what should be our main goals first. I mean, like
separation
for example,
of mosque and state. Yes, that is the main goal. But to create words to muddy the waters is not helpful.
So when somebody is trying to make separation of mosque and state, right?
Oh, I see your point. I know what you're saying.
We are trying to get rid of Islamism in that regard. We want to have an Islam. We're not getting rid of the people who believe in the stories of, let's say, the Uber story of Muhammad flying to heaven. We're trying to get rid of the idea that you as a Muslim or your version of Islam should be imposed on the.
So then you can just say secular Muslims.
Yeah,
so like there are secular Christians.
For example, in Iraq, we have Islamist parties. In Arabic, we say al-ahzab al-islamiyya. So when you say Islami, means Islamist. And when you say ahzab al-ilmaniyya or ahzab al-madaniyya, means you believe in the civil government or the secular government. Mm-hmm. So let's say if I want to get Iraq to be secular, what I mean is that I vote against the Islamists. I don't vote against the Muslims. I vote against the Islamists. You know what I mean? That's what I think.
On that. I have no problem distinguishing. I have no problem distinguishing between a Muslim and an Islamist, but you're conflating. I have no problem distinguishing between a Muslim and an Islamist. That is a valid distinction.
Because I think
there is no distinction between Islam and Islamism.
I agree with Yas.
Do you think that all versions of Islam can be? Do you think that even Sufi Islam can be Islamist?
Okay, so Faisal, you've asked me this question before, and I've responded to you before, and I told you that Sufis are being killed by Sunni Muslims. So you're now going to bring up like a teeny tiny little sect of people that are more into woo-woo and they're pacifists, and you're going to bring them as an example of what Islam is. That's not.
Well, so another thing about
but that is the basic argument that Sunni Islam
right now. No. So when we're talking about Islam, when we're talking about the Quran and the Sunnah, we're talking about Sharia. That is Islamism, or not even. Sorry, that is Islam. Islamism, same difference, same.
Yeah, well, even Sharia is like. That's
what Sharia is.
I know, but Sharia, there's a lot of, so Yaz, like this is something that you probably may not be as familiar with as we are. but Armin, I don't know if you can relate to this, but there's a lot of, when I grew up, there were a lot of sort of very secular, liberal-minded people who were pro-Sharia, because to them, Sharia was the same thing as the U.S. Constitution. It's like, well, Sharia is about freedom of speech. Sharia is like Islamic law. This is what it is. Islam promised this. It brought feminism 1,400 years ago, all that bullshit. So they think, if you think that Islam brought feminism 1,400 years ago, then feminism is part of Sharia for you, right? So for these people, so whenever they talk about, do you believe in Sharia? That is the one question in those Pew polls, and I'm like, oh, it makes me cringe, because I know how these people think. I know a lot of liberal secular Muslims who drink alcohol, and they actually believe in gender equality and all this stuff. They'd be like, yes, Islam is Sharia. They brought Sharia a long time ago. U.S. Constitution is no different from Muhammad's law. Because they've never read the Quran, they don't care about it, right? So that's this is the problem with the semantics. When you use these terms and you don't define them, it's an issue. And
you're muddying the waters too.
You do. And you're wading into this this area where everybody has a different idea of what Islamism is and what Islam is, and everybody defines it differently. So when you have one person who comes out, and I know that Majid does this and he does it really well, is that, he's got a definition of Islam, and it's very effective when he talks about it within the Western Muslim communities. It's very effective. But when you talk about these words they mean different things to different people. So if one person defines each one of these words a certain way, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get a whole bunch of people saying, oh yeah, that's right. They're not going to, it's not going to be like that.
I agree with Armin. It's just another way of saying nothing to do with Islam.
It is. Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
I mean, the reason I was trying to...
Can I just say something?
Sure.
Right. Okay, so when you say like, oh, there's these people, that people, again, but you're talking about as people, right? Islam, there is one Islam, and if you could just pick up the book and read it and you see what it means. And just to make a point, when I was in the Philippines, I talked to some Christians there, and they were so clueless. And I asked them to name me the Trinity, and they said the Father, the Son, and Mother Mary. So many people in the Philippines thought the Trinity includes Mother Mary. But does that mean Christianity? Does that mean that the concept of the Trinity in Christianity includes Mother Mary? No, it doesn't, right? So, yeah, what you're demonstrating is that there's so many different understandings, and so many people, represent, their ideologies are different, and these people have their own agenda, and they believe they have their own political ideology, and they just try to make it seem like Islam supports them, but they were already secularists, or they were already for women's rights, or they were already for gay rights. But they know to gain support for their ideas, they have to sell the idea that this is Islamic, not because they were Islamic and they read this and they concluded by studying Islam that, oh, I have to support gay rights. That usually doesn't happen. It's the other way around. You're for gay rights, you try to sell it that this is not against Islam. But Islam itself, I mean, this is not something that, if anybody just reads the Quran cover to cover, I dare them to look any of us in the eye and say that this wasn't a political book, that this was not a book about politics. You do so much gymnastics to be able to get away from that.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, I just want to clarify my stance on this. Is that, I mean, I think Yasmin got me correct, is that the differentiation between Muslim and Islamist is necessary. I think, like, especially when people are like, because let's say people who are, let's say Iraqi, let's say Ayad Allawi, who was the former Prime Minister of Iraq, he is a Muslim, but he's a secular Muslim, which is different than, let's say, Nur al-Maliki, who is an Islamist Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what I think, this distinction between Muslim and Islamist. Yes, I mean, I agree with you, Armin, that I think that religion is inherently political. I think that, and I agree with, like, a plausible interpretation. Like, I think that what ISIS is doing and what Al-Qaeda is doing, I think is a very plausible interpretation of the Quran. I don't think that they are, using the Communist Manifesto to throw gays from rooftops. I think they are mostly quoting the hadith and the But I think I think the distinction between Muslim and Islamist is more important to me than Islam and Islamism, because I think that
we already have the nomenclature for this. We have it in all the other religions. You have conservative Christians. You've got evangelical Christians. You've got liberal Christians. You've got fundamentalist Christians. Like all of these words, all you have to do is just apply this to Muslims. You can have fundamentalist Muslims. You can have political Muslims. You can have, and I think that makes a lot more sense. Right, because I think when you say Islamist, it kind of glamorizes, political Islam for a lot of people, because it has the word Islam. It's like, oh, I don't want to be Muslim. I want to be an Islamist. But if you just call
also, it's not clear. But if you say fundamentalist Muslim or a political Muslim, now it's clear.
Right. Yeah. Now it's a lot more clear, and I think that just adding those adjectives, and that's also again relatable. We have to look at what is the kind of thing that a Christian would listen to, and say, okay, yeah, that makes sense to me. I know exactly what you're talking about. A Christian's not going to listen to, or anybody, forget Christians, but any non-Muslim's not going to look at Islamist and know what the hell is going on unless they read an essay or an article on it, right? But the moment you say, okay, these are political Muslims, but those guys, they're secular Muslims, that's something that they can relate to. They'd be like, okay, and it actually helps, because they're like, oh, this guy's a secularist Muslim. He's not going to bug me. He's not going to blow up my family. But this guy, he's a fundamentalist Muslim. He's a political Muslim. I got to watch out from this guy. And I think that distinction is very helpful. That kind of terminology is a lot better for in order to communicate this stuff.
Totally agree.
Questions.
So you wanted us to take some questions from the patrons?
Let's do that. Yeah, let's do
Some of them are they're not really related. So we've got one here that asks, if bin Laden was alive today, would he condemn ISIS?
Yes, my answer is yes, because he already did condemn the leader of Al Qaeda in Iraq, the AQI, which made its way to become ISIS. So it makes sense that bin Laden would condemn Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, because he already condemned Abu Mus'ab al-Zarqawi, who was the leader of Al Qaeda, who was the founder of ISIS.
Oh yeah, there's actually a really interesting letter online from.
It was a joke, you guys.
Oh, it was. Oh, okay.
No, but it's still, that's actually serious.
Yeah,
Al-Qaeda
it is. I know. Al Qaeda are like the moderates now compared. So Jesus walks into a hotel, puts 3 nails on the counter, and says, "Can you put me up for the night?" That's from when we're asking for the jokes.
I love that. Wow. Yeah,
that's from Obaid. How would you guys react if your daughter wanted to marry a Muslim man?
Wow, that's personal though.
I don't know who wants to go.
I have 2 daughters. I can answer. I would educate them.
Yeah.
Part of being a secular, atheist, tolerant kind of person is that you don't tell your daughters who they can marry, who they can't marry. If they want to do it, they can. I agree with Yaz. I'd educate them. But someone actually asked me, like, what would you do if, go with my daughter, like, what would you do if she wanted to wear a hijab to school? And she insisted that she wanted to do it. And I just didn't see that as a controversial thing at all. Like, if she wants to wear hijab to school, she wants to wear a ski mask, whatever the fuck she wants to wear. I wanted to have long hair and put on eyeliner when I went to school. My dad didn't like it. I did it. I got over it after a while. My sister wore hijab for a little while in school. She got over it. Sometimes you have to go through these things. If you say that, no, there's no way you're going to wear it, you're just going to make them want to do it more. That's how kids work.
Yeah. For me, I think, I'm not really planning to have children, but if I do or adopt a child, I think I would raise them the same way I was raised by my parents. Is that they gave me books and asked me to read from the Torah to the Quran to the Bible to Plato to Thomas Paine to Thomas Jefferson to Imam Ali, and then make up my mind if I end up being a Muslim. If they end up being Muslims, which I think is very unlikely, then they will have
girls. It's very unlikely.
Yeah, and I would probably, if they are girls, I'll probably give them feminist material and books written by, let's say, Iranian women who lived under the Iranian regime of Ayatollahs, or Saudi women living under, so they can listen to the other side.
All right. What about you, Armin?
Yeah, so that's what I'm going to do.
I would invite him to
good. It's good
YouTube
parents.
debates.
YouTube. We invite him to the hangout.
I would be like, that's great, because I have been trying for so many years to get Muslims to debate me on YouTube, and they just only do it in private. Most of them don't want it to go public. I think I found one guy that.
So would you be happy with your daughter marrying a Muslim man?
As long as he agrees to do YouTube debates with me.
Can I guys? Okay, so first of all,
that's so funny.
I think
that's
here's
so
what,
Armin, by the way. That's so Armin.
When we're talking about all these labels and stuff, here's another thing I want to get to. My sister is married to a Muslim man. I love the guy to death. He's one of my, we're very, very close. We're really good friends. My mother was obviously married to a Muslim man who was my dad. There are not all Muslim. Fareed Zakaria is
yes,
also
we
know.
Hashtag not all.
Exactly.
No.
So Muslim, what do you mean? Like a fundamentalist Muslim? It doesn't. This is so many.
Oh, so now you're playing these games.
It doesn't even matter because it's so you don't know which way it could turn. Like even if you meet a guy and he's really great, he could end up becoming. What they do is when they get older, they start to feel like they're closer to death, and then they become more conservative. So I would just educate her about the religion, educate her about what could potentially happen. And then, hopefully I raised her right enough to be able to use her own judgment and make the right decision.
I think for me, I would go extra. I would not let my daughter marry a communist. There's no way I would. I think communism it's probably the most evil religion the world has ever known.
If it was a guy like Dave Chappelle.
Guys, be careful. You're using the word let. You're over an adult.
Yeah. So the next question is also related to women's issues.
She married Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle's a Muslim. If it was a guy like that, that'd be fucking awesome.
That would be a fun YouTube video for you, Armin.
Yeah.
So the next question, how do you encourage a woman to be stronger when she believes the religious bullshit that a man should take care of a woman? Can I answer that, Wendell?
I think you should. You're the only one who should.
Okay, so I think that you can't encourage a woman to be stronger when she believes the religious bullshit that a man should take care of a woman. There are quite a few, it's quite common that women believe that. It doesn't even necessarily have to be religious women. A lot of women feel like it's their right to just like be taken care of by a man. It's just some women feel that way because of their mindset. That's just I'm no judgment. But that's how they are, and you're not going to change her mind. And if she believes that she needs to be taken care of by a man, then let her believe that, because eventually what's going to happen, and I've seen this happen a million times, is they're so excited and they're so happy. Oh my God, I don't have to do anything. He works and he brings home, like I don't have to work. I don't have to do anything. He takes care of everything. This is wonderful. And she gets taken care of like a little chihuahua, right? She gets like the little diamond collar, and she gets her food bowl, and she gets her little taken to the salon and taken care of, and she loves her life and she's so happy. But then eventually she doesn't want to be a chihuahua anymore. She wants to be a full-grown human being. And this is women in Saudi Arabia, a perfect example of this. Women in Saudi Arabia.
Vessels type.
Women in Saudi Arabia. Not all, obviously, but in those GCC countries, so Saudi Arabia and Qatar and all of those extremely rich Arab countries, Sharia countries as well, the women don't do anything. They don't have to work. They obviously don't have to go to school, because you go to school to work. All they do all day long is get their nails and their hair done and buy more jewelry and whatever. And they are bored to tears, because eventually all of that stuff is not fulfilling. And your only purpose in life is to look pretty, to get a good husband and make babies. And life doesn't really have any meaning to it. So if your friend that you're talking about, is feeling like this is a positive thing for her, then you just got to let her go through her journey. And maybe she won't go through a journey. Maybe she'll just feel like this is great, and she's happy being taken care of her whole life. And some women in Saudi Arabia really do believe that they're treated like queens, and that's fine. But lots of others completely disagree. And it's just every individual is different. What about you guys? What do you think?
I think what you just said. Awesome.
Awesome. All right. This is good. Next question. Does the Muslim faith act as a fundamentally civilizing force or the opposite?
Say that again.
Does the Muslim faith, so does Islam, act as fundamentally? Is it a civilizing force or the opposite?
I don't think any faith can ever be a civilizing force, because faith tells you not to think and to believe things without evidence. The only thing that's ever been a civilizing force ever in history for any kind of thing.
Oh, sorry, I need to interrupt you. That was the second half of the question, because I just scrolled up. The first half was, do you think that if the Muslim world were to magically turn atheist, would things be better or worse in the Middle East? So I think the two questions are related.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, I guess I was going to answer that anyway, that part of it too.
Mm-hmm.
Without knowing it, is that I think that the only time when people say that it was Judeo-Christian values that led to the Enlightenment, no, the Enlightenment happened because it was against Judeo-Christian values. It was a backlash against it. It was the rise of secularism, of free thought, of the scientific method, of critical thinking. And these are the things that eventually lead to civilized societies. It's never faith. Faith, by definition, is to, if this chair I'm sitting on, I don't have faith that it exists. I know it exists because I have evidence that it's there. Faith is believing things by definition. It's believing things without any evidence. That can never lead to any kind of, civilized outcome. This can. So, and then the Muslim faith, unfortunately, because there's so many more people adhere to it so much more closely than they do to other faiths. You're seeing the effect. I mean, if you want to see the effect of what happens when people take religious faith too seriously, look at Islam.
Mm-hmm.
May I answer that?
Mm-hmm.
Please, sir.
I think it does depend on the context. I mean, if people are burying my daughters alive, and this other stupid ideology comes and everything about it is stupid, but also says that you can't do that, you can't bury baby girls alive, and there's nothing else around, I would be like, yes, that ideology. Can
I just say something? I just want to interrupt you, Armin, for one moment. I know they sell us that all the time. In the days of the Jahiliyyah, they used to bury the baby girls, and Islam came and saved them, and Islam is feminism, blah, blah, blah. But it turns out that it's actually a very tiny minority of a small group of people that were actually doing that. It wasn't as widespread as we were led to believe.
But I'm not suggesting Islam is feminist at all, right? I'm just saying that it could. I mean, let's say for sake of argument, it was better than what it was before, right? That doesn't make it good now at all, right? I mean, an ideology could be absolutely terrible for our world today, but still an improvement for what it was before it. That is possible. Possible, right? And I mean, I honestly don't really know. I mean, when it comes to historicity of what happened in Islam, there's so much less evidence for any of this shit. So I just go by what's canon, right? I don't really care if it happened or not. I just go, this is the story. This is what we're going by, right? So this is the canonized version of Islam. So I treated most of it as fiction anyways. It's cool fiction though. But here's the thing is that Islam could actually be an improvement. I could just come up right now with a worse ideology in Islam on top of my head, right? I could just make up something, an ideology. Actually, here it actually existed. Think about the Vikings, right? You can't so in Islam, if you die as a martyr, you go to heaven. But there are other ways to go to heaven, right? But I think Vikings, if you want to go to Valhalla, you had to die with a sword in your hand fighting. So everybody had to die fighting. It's not just some people, right? I mean, look at the Mayan religion, the practice of human sacrifice, the fascination with blood and pain to get close to gods. I think these are really cool religions, but if they were being practiced, I would go with Islam if they were actually being practiced today, right? So I think it's all relative.
Yeah, Islam would have been like the Kabbalah to the Vikings.
I think here's the thing. I think a lot of people think that Islam has to be the worst for us to say anything about it. It doesn't have, as long as it's bad, it's enough for us to shit on it as much as we want because it's bad, right? It doesn't have to be the worst, right? We don't have to compete over making it the worst thing ever existed. It's still pretty shitty.
Faisal, do you have an answer?
Well, I mean, I think that the influence of religion, regardless of what the religion is, I think is generally a bad thing on society. I think that, I mean, one of the main things about religion is that it asks people that, I think that fake news, like religion is the ultimate fake news, is that it allows people to believe things without evidence and discount things purely on the concept of faith. So I think in general, whether it's Islam or not, I think the influence of religion is generally, at least in its conservative form, a negative influence of society. But I actually would like to answer, I think the second question was, is it possible to apostatize all Muslims or atheists, turn Muslim to atheist?
No, that wasn't.
No, it was if everybody became an atheist, would that be better? If all Muslims became?
I think it depends. I mean, as I said, I think that a mix of atheism plus a Jeffersonian democracy would be great. But I think that atheism plus communism would probably be as harmful, if not more harmful, than what we have right now with Islam. Even though that being said, I think that with communists, you're dealing with materialist people. So, for example, deterrence during the Cold War with the Soviet Union worked because when you know that the United States, if the Soviets would nuke America, America would nuke back, and that would kill lives of the Soviet leaders. But when you're dealing with people who believe in heaven and 72 virgins, I think that doesn't act as a... I mean, there is this concept called mutually assured destruction. I think it works more with communists than it works with Islamists and Muslims. So I think that atheism, if it's going to turn, if it's the way it practiced by us, let's say, I love atheism as a practice, but centrist atheism, I think probably would create the world a better place and much better than it is right now.
Yeah, I think
secularism versus atheism, but yeah.
Yeah. If you have the Hitchens challenge, remember that when he asked, he said that name one moral or good act or thing that can be said or done by a religious person that cannot be said or is not done by a non-religious person. Nobody can name anything, like everything from charity to good
halal chicken. Halal chicken is the only good thing that Muslims do.
Turns out that's really bad for the animals, but anyway.
But apparently, but chicken in general, all of these things, basically, non-believers can do all the good stuff that religious people can do, and they do all the good stuff, that from philanthropy, charity, to everything. But then he said the second part of it was that it name one wicked or evil action or utterance that can that will not be done by a non-believer, but can only be done by a religious person. And suddenly you have a million things, right? Jihad, genital mutilation, like all of these things.
Honor killing.
So if you take those two things, and then you take the third part of this, which is that good people do good things and bad people do bad things overall, if you take all of these three things into consideration, religion does become a sort of net negative for humanity overall. And at the least, it's unnecessary.
Yeah.
Right? But at the very least, it's completely unnecessary.
Some people mention that even without religion, people will find excuses to do crazy shit and go to war.
Speak for yourself, Andre.
Yeah. No, but my response to that is usually yes. Yeah, but they will have one less reason and one major reason. It doesn't, it's like...
And they won't have the support of millions.
They wouldn't have divine endorsement for their bullshit. That's the thing.
Yeah, it's one of the strongest tools. Just because they still have tools in their, to do these things they still have nationalism, right? They still have other things that they could, other dogmas that they could delude people with, but we just took away one of the most effective ways to make people do things that is not in their best interest, right? And that is religion. There's no other more powerful force that could convince people to fight for a cause that is not good for them. And if you could take it away, slowly from people, that's a very good thing to do. And it's not going to solve all the world problems. Nobody should ever say that all the world problems come from religion. But it's better. It's going to be a better world. It's not going to be a perfect world, but it's going to be a better world.
But you have to let people come to it themselves. You can't enforce atheism.
And here's the thing. And other people say, like, why can you force people to stop believing? I never understand how is that even possible? That's actually not possible to force somebody to not believe or believe in anything, right? The only thing you could do is to invite them to consider something. You could force people to do things or not do things, but there's no way you could force people to think a certain way. And another thing about the argument that people should come to these conclusions on themselves, but that's also impossible because every single idea that you have comes from your environment. Right? Whatever ideas you have or learn, you either read a book, you saw a post, you saw the news, you listened to the radio, you listened to podcasts. So when you say people should come up to these conclusions on their own, well, no, they can't. Every idea that we have came from...
No, but on their own, I mean that they should listen to what's in their environment and they should decide what course makes most sense to them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the end of the day...
Rather than... what I'm getting at is that secularism was in a lot of the Middle East and among Arab countries. There were a lot of secular dictators. It was enforced secularism.
But they weren't enforcing an idea; they were forcing behavior.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about, like this idea. So they have a bad association with it, right? So anyway,
all right.
So that brings the end of it.
That brings us to the end of it. Yep. Khalas.
Okay. Khalas. So that brings the end of our show tonight. The audio will be up probably in the next 20 years, I think.
Probably.
And this video is only for patrons. So if you guys like the video, please tell your friends to donate to us so they can see future patrons, future shows.
And hopefully it won't be as bad as this one.
Yeah, so we need the money because we want to build settlements in the West Bank. And we really appreciate any donation from the one and only Jewish state, the state of Israel.
And also reviews.
And if you guys like Armin or like any of us, please write us a review on SoundCloud, Patreon, iTunes. There's this other one, lesbian.com.
Stop telling people to go to that website.
LIBSYN.
And please, guys, share. I would love, if you guys enjoy the conversation, the easiest thing you can do is just tweet it or share it to your friends. Ask them to comment and recommend it if they like to their friends. We want this podcast to reach as many people as possible, and considering that Facebook is making it difficult for people to reach their own audience, and they ask us to pay to reach our own audience, I hope you guys can help us reach as many people as possible. And thank you very much, and may God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
The secular jihadists have been made possible thanks to the gracious support of the Illuminati and the great state of Israel. That's what we have been told, but we haven't received our checks yet. In the meantime, we greatly appreciate the support of our current donors. Please consider supporting by sharing the podcast with your fellow heathens or by donating at patreon.com/SJME.